So let's just picture this for a second. You're gonna bake some bread, the recipe looks simple enough, all your ingredients are fresh, you measure everything out meticulously, but then when it comes out of the oven, it's a mess, a total failure. So what on earth could have possibly gone wrong?
Well, in a story that scholar Dr. Hanny tells, this is the exact scenario. The recipe says you need 850 grams of flour. Simple. So you pour your flour into a big, heavy glass bowl. You pop it on the scale, and boom, it reads a perfect 850 grams. You mix it all up, you bake it, and what you get is a dense, inedible brick. The thing is, every step seemed completely flawless. And this brings us to a really brilliant insight from Dr. Hanny. He says, the scale is being truthful, but it's not the truth. Think about that for a second. That 850-gram reading, it was totally accurate, but it wasn't the truth we were actually trying to find. So what was really going on? Here's the twist. The problem was never the flour. The ingredient was perfectly fine. The real problem was that heavy glass bowl it was sitting in. The scale was measuring the weight of the flour plus the weight of its container, all jumbled together. And here is the hidden culprit right here. That glass bowl, all by itself, weighed a whopping 626 grams. That means instead of the 850 grams of flour you thought you had, you really only had 224. Of course the bread failed. The container totally corrupted the measurement. Now the solution, as pretty much any baker will tell you, is super simple. You put the empty bowl on the scale first, and then you hit that tare or zero button. This tells the scale, hey, ignore the weight of this thing. Only then can you actually measure the ingredient itself. And that simple act, that's a methodology. So let's see how this whole baking disaster builds into this powerful analogy at the core of a very high-stakes argument from Dr. Hanny. The flour, that's our pure ingredient, is like a pure scriptural text. The glass bowl, the container, is like human interpretation and tradition. And tearing the scale, well, that represents the correct methodology you need to separate the text from the heavy container of interpretation. So, what exactly is a methodology? It's just a set of standards and guidelines for how to use an instrument properly. And that instrument could be a kitchen scale, it could be a microscope, or it could be a sacred text. The point is, without the right methodology, even a truthful instrument can give you a completely false result.
And this leads us to his central claim. He argues that for a text as unique as the Quran, you can't just borrow a methodology from somewhere else. The instructions for how to read it, how to understand its own terms, they have to be found inside the Quran itself. You can't use some external container to define what's going on inside. Okay, so what's really at stake here? I mean, does it really matter? What happens when this principle is ignored? Let's look at a really dramatic example that Dr. Hanny brings up, where using what he calls an external container leads to a radically different conclusion. For literally centuries, the common understanding has been that the prophet Nuh, you might know him as Noah, lived for 950 years. This number is everywhere. It's taught widely, and it shows up in countless translations and commentaries. But hold on, where did this number actually come from? Dr. Hanny argues that this is a perfect example of using an external container. Scholars adopted the 950-year figure from the Old Testament and then basically read it into the Quranic text. They were mixing the ingredient with a foreign container without even realizing it. Now, to make his case, Dr. Hanny points to very specific linguistic evidence. The verse in question actually uses two different Arabic words, sana and am. For centuries, people have just treated them as synonyms, both meaning year. But his whole argument is that the Quran uses them as two very distinct units of measurement, and we're losing the real meaning by just mashing them together. So what happens if you apply a methodology from within the text? Dr. Hanny argues that the word sana, based on how it's used in other verses, often connected to hardship or, barrenness, it refers to an unproductive state or an unproductive group of people. So in this reading, the text is describing a community of 1,000 unproductive people, minus the 50 who were followers. So the question becomes, how long did Noah stay with them?
The answer he comes to? 1. Just a single 1 single year. That's it. So by separating these two words, by using the text's own internal dictionary, the conclusion completely flips from 950 years to just 1. I mean, that is a staggering, incredible difference, and it all boils down to one thing: methodology. Now, it's really important to know this isn't just some random theory. This example is a piece of Dr. Honey's detailed, evidence-based critique of a very famous and well-regarded book by Dr. Ali al-Qaradaghi, who happens to be the current president of the International Union of Muslim Scholars. And let's be clear, this is a very nuanced critique. It's not a blanket rejection of the whole book.
Dr. Haney
Actually praises the book for its strong stance on certain issues, and he agrees with Dr. Qaradaghi's powerful statement that legal declarations belong to God alone, not to any human authority. But the core of the critique comes right back to our analogy. Dr. Haney's main issue is that Dr. Qaradaghi, despite all his insights, still accepts definitions of key terms from centuries of traditional scholarship, which is just another external container that gets mixed in with the pure ingredient of the text itself. So in the end, Dr. Haney's entire argument really comes back to this one powerful idea: that to truly understand a foundational text, you first have to have a rigorous methodology to isolate the content from the container it's been carried in for centuries. You have to tear the scale before you can ever trust the measurement. And this leaves all of us with a really provocative question, one that goes way beyond any single text or recipe. When we learn something, anything at all, how much of what we know is the pure ingredient of truth, and how much of it is just the weight of the container it was delivered in?